So I'm pleased to introduce Judy Frater. Judy is the Jan Els International Scholar for the 2015 ITAA conference. Judy will be talking about the third part in our trilogy that has to do with ethical practices and sustainability, and in this case, focusing on cultural sustainability as related to business practices. Judy has spent the last quarter century, and I found out yesterday, actually 26 years, living and working among the Rabari and other artisans of the Kutch region of India. She is co-founder and over 20 years was the project director of Kalaraksha Trust. This is a 1,000-member artisan organization that over time became known for innovating within their traditions to create products for contemporary markets in India and abroad. Judy later founded Kalaraksha Vidyalaya, which was the first design school for traditional artists in India. Currently, she is the director of Somaiya Vidya, which is a very unique institute that integrates traditional knowledge, core design courses, and business management for artisans. Judy's received many, many awards for her work in design education. Just two I want to mention that I believe are the most prestigious. She is an Ashoka Fellow for Social Entrepreneurship, and I believe she may be the only one that is in our area of textiles. And then several years ago, she received the Sir Misha Black Award for Distinguished Service to Design Education, which is kind of like the Nobel Prize in design education. Today, Judy will speak with us on valuing the unique, matching the maker and the market for international craft. So please join me in welcoming Judy Frater.
Oh, I'm very tall suddenly. Okay. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm honored to receive the Janet Els scholarship in order to be here. I'm happy to be at ITAA for the first time, and I'm especially happy that the theme for this year's conference is celebrating the unique. As Mary mentioned, I work with traditional artisans in India, and I think their work is nothing if not unique. I was asked to speak about the role of textile artisans, traditional textile artisans, in the fast emerging creative economy. I had to think about this one. And I understand traditional arts in contemporary society as a sort of ever-evolving relationship where society evolves and the market evolves ever increasingly rapidly. Traditional artisans strive to keep up with that and retain their integrity, but there's an inherent conflict because craft is not fast. And so I think the stage at which we have arrived now, which is precisely thinking of traditional arts within the context of the emerging creative economy, is maybe the most challenging so far. I have a lot more questions than I have answers, but I hope in asking some of these questions, it will enable us to focus in on some of the issues that we need to address. Okay, today I want to talk about value. While we celebrate the unique, how do we ensure that we also value it? Traditional crafts in each region of the world are unique. That's because they are part of traditional cultures. They express identity and cultural heritage. And I want to situate you where I am. This is a map of India with Kutch in the pink area, and that's where I'm working. And I also want to say that in my talk today, I'll use the terms traditional art, traditional craft, and folk art sort of interchangeably. But what I am speaking about is art that comes out of a traditional culture. We know there's a market for good traditional-based craft. In India, we're fortunate blessed perhaps, to have a very robust domestic market. And also, I think several of you have experienced or heard about the International Folk Art Market, which is held here in Santa Fe so far every year. And there are many artisans in India as well as other areas of the world for which this has become a sort of ultimate in marketing. Here's just to give you a few images from last year's folk art market, and we had 3 graduates of Somaiya Vidya at the market last year, and there have been 4 others in years previous. And just if you look at the lower left-hand corner, Zakia, one of our young graduates, she's a Bandhani artist, very ambitious, and she's presenting here in her business course her business plan for her future, and you can see right there that Santa Fe Folk Art Market is right at the top of her list. To give you some statistics about last year's market, but I'm doing this in order to provide an opportunity to give you an idea of what this perspective is in terms of Indian traditional artisans. Okay, just now in July, there were 173 folk artists from 57 countries, 19,000 visitors, $2.9 million of folk art sold in 21 hours, and the average booth sales were over $20,000. Now, what does that mean to someone like Dayabai? Dayabai is a traditional weaver from Kutch. He has gone through our design and business programs, and he's currently a faculty person at Somaiya Vidya. When he earned about a little less than $20,000, that's more than double what he usually makes in a year. So this is really life-changing, and it gives us pause to think about what that actually means. It also lets us know that indeed there is a good platform for excellent traditional craft that is market-ready. Okay, but the reach of the Santa Fe Folk Art Market is, in the big picture, relatively small. What would that percentage, what percentage of world traditional artisans would 173 artists be? And in addition, a few of those artists who come are repeat artists. So the new artists coming in are even less than 173. So the question is, how can all of those other folk artists or traditional artists increase their incomes to sustainable levels? Because if they don't, they often, even very good artisans, simply leave craft. If they can't make a living at it, they leave craft. So the main question that I really want to ask is, how are these artisans going to market their work? So what can we learn from the International Folk Art Market? It definitely celebrates the unique, and people come from all over the country, even all over the world, to attend this market. Surely they could buy craft closer to home. Why do they come all that way? Well, I think that one of the key reasons is that there's a very joyful, satisfying, direct interaction between the artist, the producer, and the consumer, and that really is the essence of traditional folk art. So, I know there has been a lot of discussion about where do we go from here, and from hearing from Jeff, the director of the market, and Sandy yesterday, I think that some exciting prospects are coming up. However, what I hear in working with traditional artisans often is scaling up. You have to scale up. And many times scaling up production is either overtly or covertly the criterion for funding agencies to choose your project. So I want to ask, why are we thinking of scale in terms of traditional art? Is it traditional artisans who want scale? In many places, I don't think any place actually, traditional art was ever done in big scale. And in Kutch, for example, it was actually a part-time job in the lulls of the agricultural cycle. And the consumers were intimately known, and it was almost like custom production. So do artisans want scale? We had, as I mentioned, 3 artisans who graduated from our school at the Folk Art Market last year in July, and I asked them what they thought about scaling. They represent, fortunately, 3 different levels of scale. Junaid, who is a block print and natural dyer, does pretty large-scale production, thousands of meters of hand block printed, natural dyed fabric every year. And what he said is, see if I can find this, there is a demand for scale, but it requires standardization. We have both scale and quality, but we have problems with our color variation, so we work with customers who accept that. He also said that there's an advantage to scale, for example, working for Fab India, which is a very large marketing agency in India for craft. And it was because of Fab India that we learned costing and we could scale. Now, after that, we had a seminar in which there was a representative of Fab India there, and Junaid initially refused to come because he said Fab India exploits artisans. So there's obviously a little bit of ambivalence in this operating at a large scale. Now, Aziz, who's pictured here in the upper right, is a Bandhani artist. He's the one who made this wonderful scarf that I'm wearing and the one that Jan is wearing. He's reached a level of maybe medium scale production. And what he said is, with increase in scale, there's a compromise in quality. Quality is important to us. We want to increase in scale, but how do we do so and maintain quality? And then Dayabai, the weaver who I showed earlier, said very simply, I don't believe in scale, because when it's large scale, it's no longer craft. So scaling up really is the industrial model, where the goals are faster, cheaper, and more standard. And I feel that for craft to increase in scale, it has to be done keeping in mind the essential characteristics of folk art or handmade craft. Those are, first, that it is handmade. It's the product of not only the human hand, but the human spirit, okay? Second, it's labor intensive, and it is slow. Third, traditional craft is personal and unique. It is the expression of cultural heritage and identity. Fourth, it tells a story. And finally, it's traditionally, usually, craft is using natural materials and eco-friendly techniques, and usually made in a remote and rural area of the world. So these have to be kept in mind when we're thinking about the question of scaling. Okay, so if artisans aren't particularly interested in large scale, then is it the consumer that's interested, that wants to have large scale? My guess was that consumers of craft are not very interested in mass production. That's precisely why they're buying craft. However, guessing is no longer an option. We need statistics. And fortunately, the Crafts Council of England in 2010 did a study of the crafts consumption in England. And first of all, they found that it's significant. That's important to know. 63% of the population consumes 913 million pounds sterling of craft every year. Second, the study found that craft consumers tend to be women, educated, older, culturally active, open-minded, and independent thinking. I think all of us already knew that. Okay, but more important, this study really defined cultural consumption, and it also correlated craft consuming with current consumer trends. I think this is important. English consumers value craft in terms of authenticity, quality, workmanship, and personal touch. So in a time that has been termed the era of consequences, the trends that we're looking at are consumers are now, the demand has now shifted towards value-centered products, and they're looking to satisfy emotional as well as functional needs. And craft consumers buy craft because it's unique, and also because it's an ethical route to consumption. And it's an experience, a way of signaling a new type of connoisseurship. In short, scaling up of craft production would hardly meet the needs of these consumers. Okay, the study that I'm citing was done in the UK, and it's Eurocentric, so applying the findings to developing countries such as India don't exactly fit. I think some things are relevant. I think the main difference is that in the developing world, we are aware of a growing creative economy, and we see handwork as rare and valuable, whereas in India, for example, craft is not so rare. There are many traditional artisans, and it comes down to the issue of value, which gets aggravated when we talk about large scale. In the social hierarchy of India, the more you work with the hands, the lower your social status. Very unfortunate, but true. And when we talk about increasing production, scaling up, what happens is master artisans, who not necessarily the better artisans, but the more economically strong artisans, hire others at the lowest possible wages in order to make that big-time production. And so what that means is the perception of the artisan as a laborer is reinforced, and actually artisan and art are devalued. Now, one good thing is that cultural consumption is not really a price-sensitive market. And so thinking in terms of the needs of both the artisan and the consumer, I'd like to think of enhancing value rather than volume. And this would mean better wages and better life conditions for a greater number of people, a sort of horizontal expansion. Now, in India, I don't think there's a very much consciousness of a creative economy, even though, as in the West, the functional needs have pretty much been taken over by industrial production. But still, the Indian government tends to think of craft in terms of productivity, in which case it doesn't measure up to big, larger scale industrial production. And so what we find is terms like languishing being used, and subsidies being given, and very sad to say, but artisans are hand loom weavers, for example. There's a large controversy going on right now between hand loom and power loom in India. The hand loom weavers are being subsidized to produce yards of plain white cotton polyester fabric used for school uniforms, or sheets for the Indian railways, while in the meantime, the power looms are producing more valuable products such as saris and scarves. So obviously, the government is not recognizing those aspects of crafts which are valued by the consumers who were cited in the UK Crafts Council study. And this sort of, what this means is, because artisans are not valued, they're seen as anonymous producers of lower value, that if they don't leave craft altogether, they often think in terms of employing other less fortunate artisans. And this is sort of the Peter principle of the craft world. So thinking about all this and thinking about how to genuinely enhance the value of craft, I thought that we have to begin with the perception of the art and the artisan. And that's why in 2005, I started the first design school for traditional artisans. The intent was to increase the value of artisans and craft, to raise not only income but also social status. And I was thinking that design is considered valuable, and up till now more valuable than craft. And so I think also something that I realized over 8 years of running the design education program is that education actually focuses on the individual. I don't think I was really conscious of that before, but that's what it does. And certainly it focuses on the unique. And what we were able to see in 8 years of operation, now 10 years really, 135 graduates. Each of those has come forth as an individual to reach better markets. And the most amazing thing to me is that there's virtually no duplication. It's like fingerprints. Although these artisans are drawing from the same shared traditions, each one interprets it in his own way, his or her own way. Okay, after 8 years of operating a design education program, I saw that there was also, in order to fully realize the economic benefits, a little business was needed. So in 2014, I launched a business and management education program for graduates. It's a postgraduate or graduate program for graduates of the design program. And I think the big takeaway of that was the importance of ownership. Ownership increased capacity and also value for those who participated in the program. Both of the courses, the design course and the business course, end in public events. And this is because we are working on perception of artisans and their arts. The design course ends in a fashion show, and that really compels the public to value artisans and their arts in new ways. And it's a very, very popular event. And the business course ends in a student-designed and produced exhibition, sort of like a pop-up, in a prestigious gallery in Mumbai. And that provides immediate economic benefit, immediate value, addition in value. Okay, so value brings opportunity. Both the design and the entrepreneurship programs have tapped individual creativity for people like Dayabai, who's, again, our faculty person. The innovation has diversified the market, and in diversifying the market has also expanded. Okay, now I'm going to a couple of blank slides because we haven't gotten here yet. This is the imagination part. Okay, so we know that education for artisans has increased their value, the value of the unique among artisans in one small area of one developing country. So can we take this microcosm back to the original question, how are artisans with increased capacity going to market their work? And maybe we can rephrase that into how are they going to tap into that craft market, which we are beginning to define. So I'd like to think of scaling out rather than scaling up. This is maybe a term that I thought up on my own, I'm not sure. But what this looks like to me is small-scale artisans, designer entrepreneurs, artisan designers as we like to call them, working on limited or even one-of-a-kind production. And maybe the amount of work would be the same or even more, but the value would be more. Diversity, decentralization, ownership would be increased. Okay, in order to build this kind of artisan alliance, we need to, I was always thinking we need to look for, I always had this idea that out there were these markets, we just had to find them. Now I'm sort of thinking maybe we have to sort of develop them. And in working on this presentation, I collaborated a bit with some cultural economists, who Priyatej Kotipelli and Arjo Klamer, who are working at Erasmus University in the Netherlands, and they talk about a creative craft culture. They talk about nurturing a creative craft culture in which we would have on the production side pretty much the kind of craft that we are able to develop through our education programs. But in addition, you need on the consumption side people who know the world of creative crafts, appreciation of creative quality, willingness to pay, and, this is an important one, significant local demand as well as international interest. And so what I feel is that artisans as well as consumers need a network of venues in congruence with that unique aspect of artisan production. So can we imagine a marketing organization that could have a network of small venues celebrating the unique? And maybe, just maybe, this is what the International Folk Art Alliance is working toward. Let's hope so. So we are looking toward developing local demand, and I think that is an important aspect because although we here in this room can relate, of course, to the export of craft to our Western world, really having that local market is going to ensure sustainability. So we have to talk about this network of new kinds of venues for sales, marketing of craft in other areas of the world as well, areas where the craft itself is produced. And that all is going to require marketing. Marketing is what raises value, as we all know here in the United States, which I think invented marketing. So the final question for today is, do we dare to market traditional craft as valuable for its creativity and its uniqueness? Okay. One more point to the creative craft culture that the people at Erasmus University are working toward is that in addition to the shops that I'm envisioning, we also need other types of intermediaries, experts, journalists, scholarship, and intensive discussions about the works of creative people, creative crafts people. And I would like to say here, to share with you that I'm very excited that 3 of the graduates of our school are featured as we speak at a major exhibition at the V&A Museum. It's called Fabric of India. Aziz, who made this, Dayabai, the weaver, and also Khalid, all have pieces that are standing shoulder to shoulder with works of very well-known designers of India. This is very exciting. But I think most exciting not only is that it's happening, but that people are talking about it. And I think this is what the Erasmus people are talking about. We need this kind of discussion. And success is determined first by experts and then by those who follow them. And I have these images right here of Gee's Bend, which I hope all of you recognize, because I think that the best example I can think of this, of valuing the creative craft work is the Gee's Bend project. Where really the value for these amazing, wonderful works of craft came about because a few daring critics were willing to value these quilts. And so I think all of us here in this room can play a part in not only celebrating traditional craft, but also valuing it. Thank you.